It has been nearly 100 days since Russia invaded Ukraine, beginning a grueling conflict that has taken thousands of innocent lives. Ukrainian forces are bogged down in the nation's eastern region, waiting for more advanced weapons and anti-aircraft weapons promised by the West. Joining us now is Nina Khrushcheva. She is a professor of international affairs at the New York School in New York City. Thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate it. You know, when you think about it, I started thinking back. I covered the Olympics in China. The day I was flying home, this conflict broke out back in February. It is now June. How much longer, in your opinion, do you think this conflict could continue?
Well, the Russians are now saying, thank you. The Russians are saying that they believe that by the end of the summer, they would be able to meet their objectives. That is to denazify Ukraine, to demilitarize Ukraine, and prevent genocide in the Donbas region and now in further regions that they have been able to take. I would imagine that it's probably going to be longer because at this point, it appears to me that it's going to be a war of attrition in many ways. It's going to be one of those frozen conflicts that Russia took the territory, but Ukraine probably will not agree to recognize it. And they will be, even if the official ceasefire or some sort of negotiations will happen, I would not imagine that Ukrainians would stop fighting somewhere along the border. So it will become a frozen conflict for, I would believe, for some time to come.
Oh, that's so daunting to think about, just the amount of time so far and what's to come in the future. Some Ukrainian forces will have to wait weeks for more Western weapons to arrive. How crucial has U.S. military aid been for Ukraine?
I think it has been crucial in the sense it was able to defend itself against the Russian forces better than it was expected. Remember, there was a conversation that the Russians would be able to take Kyiv in a week, which clearly did not happen. And it doesn't seem to be Russians to be wanting to take Kyiv anymore at all. So it has been crucial. But my fear is that even if Ukraine is able to provide defense, we also should admit and remember that when the conflict began on February 24th this year, Russia controlled about 30% of the territory of those Donetsk and Luhansk self-proclaimed republics. Now it controls 75%. It did not control the Kherson region, which now it controls fully. It did not control parts of the Kharkiv region, which now it does, and so on. So Russia now controls, even if Ukraine is fighting like hell, Russia controls much more territory. So Russia is advancing, and I don't believe Putin is going to stop. So these weapons are crucial for defense. I don't know how actually well they work in the long run against the Russian advancement.
Well, along those lines, I hate to play the what-if game, but in your mind, is there something that could have happened differently if the West had not offered up these weapons?
Probably, but I mean, history doesn't know conditional tenses. We're already in fourth month. There were potential moments when negotiations could have happened earlier, but it did not. But also, Ukraine should not have agreed to just Russians rolling in and taking the territory. So I think it was very helpful. But that's the war. It's really unpredictable, and it's a horrible thing.
Right. Do you think Western powers are doing enough to keep Ukraine independent of Russia at this point, or what more should or could be done?
Well, I think they're doing enough to keep Ukraine independent. And the thing about the weapons supplies, maybe at this point they should be considered some other options, because in wars before, and we know that territory was lost, but national integrity stayed on. So it's not the same as national independence. So one should consider now more the question of national independence rather than territorial integrity. It may be that we get to that point, because once again, I want to go back to the fact that Russians, even if they didn't do as well as they thought they would or everybody expected they would, they still took a lot of Ukrainian territory already. And I just don't see how it's going to go back to Ukraine unless some really serious concessions are made on part of Ukraine. if negotiations happen. So I think that territorial national independence now is more important than territorial integrity. I know it's a very unpopular view, but here it is.
Well, I do think, to your point, that, there was so much discussion that Russia thought that they would come in and they'd be able to take over the country very, very quickly. And now we are at this 100 days. Ukraine has put up a fight as best they can. What do you think Russian President Vladimir Putin's strategy is now? You talk about that they're saying the war, they'll be able to take this over by the end of the summer. But are you hearing specifics? Does he have a strategy? We haven't seen much of him recently.
Well, we've seen him, actually, we do see him a little bit. I mean, he's not particularly big talker, as we know. He doesn't really,
right.
He has people for that, and, they kind of deliver the message. No, I mean, I actually think that at this point, they sort of figured out that it's not going to happen overnight. Ukraine, and one of the military commanders, interestingly enough, I mean, I thought, well, that was a talker, and especially for a military man, he said, well, our greatest mistake that we thought that Ukrainians will meet us with flowers. And like, wait a minute, how did you think that? I mean, do you know at all anything about Ukraine? So once they figured out that there's no flowers, that basically what Putin's agenda has been since 2014, since the annexation of Crimea, is to return those land that one time, long time ago, belonged to supposedly Russia, which is called Novorossiya, New Russia. And it does seem that they're going towards that objective. And it does perhaps possible that when they stop there, it would probably be close to the Dnieper River, which is, in the middle of Ukraine as it is now. They would say, okay, fine, now we can negotiate and maybe we can give you back something here, something there. So it does seem that at this point, the Russian military and the Kremlin is ready to go for as long as they need to, first of all, to do this. And second of all, to prove the point to the West is that you didn't want to, meet our demands. So now we just demolish the whole country. So you see what we can do. So what I'm trying to say, and you said if Western powers could do more or less, I think the lesson of this war also is that Russia got worse. I mean, Russia got angry if it wasn't ranked war, but it did not really get weaker. I mean, it will get weaker one day, but not yet. And unfortunately, that's really not helping Ukraine at all.
Those are all important points. Nina Khrushcheva, Professor of International Affairs at the New School in New York City, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.